Fame has a strange way of arriving in a person's life, sometimes slowly, like a shadow stretching across the floor at sunset, and sometimes suddenly, like a door being thrown open to a room full of bright lights. For Adrian Cole, the fame that found him was both dazzling and disorienting. It came from a world he never imagined he would become part of, a world most people knew only through screens and whispers. When he first stepped into the adult entertainment industry, he wasn't thinking about fame at all. He was thinking about rent, overdue bills, and the growing fear that life was slipping out of his control. He didn't know then that fame would become both a blessing and a burden, something that would lift him up while slowly carving pieces away from him. Before the industry, Adrian was just another face in a crowded city. He worked long shifts in a warehouse, spent his nights juggling side gigs, and carried a sense of exhaustion so constant it felt like part of his personality. He had dreams once, dreams of acting, performing on stage, maybe even directing indie films. But those dreams faded under the weight of financial reality. Bills didn't care about passion. Responsibilities didn't wait for motivation. So when a friend of a friend introduced him to someone in the adult industry who promised quick money and flexible work, Adrian saw an opportunity. He told himself it was temporary, just until he could get ahead, just until life felt manageable again. What he didn't realize was that some opportunities come with invisible strings, and once tied, they are hard to escape. His first shoot was awkward but professional. He expected sleaze and discomfort. Instead, he found a crew that treated the job with an almost mechanical normalcy. At the end of the day, he walked out with more money than he had made in 2 weeks at the warehouse. That alone felt intoxicating. It wasn't long before he accepted a second shoot, then a third. Soon, he adopted a stage name, a persona crafted to be bold and confident. Someone completely unlike the quiet, anxious man he felt he truly was. And slowly, people began to notice him. His videos gained traction, his social media following grew, and fans started treating him like someone special. Fame arrived quietly at first, just a trickle of attention, but it grew steadily until even he couldn't deny that he had become recognizable in a niche world. For a while, the attention thrilled him. Messages poured in from people who admired him, who praised his looks, who said they felt less alone because of his openness and his presence online. That part surprised him the most. He had never been someone others looked up to, but here he was, receiving messages from people saying he inspired them to feel confident in their own skin. He didn't fully understand how or why, but the validation warmed something inside him that had felt cold for years. Fame, he realized, could be addictive. It soothed insecurities. It made him feel seen, important, valuable. But fame also brought a new kind of pressure, one he had not anticipated. The moment people began to see him as a star, the expectations changed. Directors wanted more from him. Fans demanded constant updates. Agents pushed him to maintain a certain image. He found himself working more than ever, not out of financial necessity, but out of fear of losing relevance. In a market where new faces emerged daily, staying on top required endless effort. He began training aggressively, dieting intensely, and obsessing over his appearance. He convinced himself these sacrifices were necessary, that this was the price of success. But as weeks turned to months, and months turned into years, the persona he had created began to feel heavier, as if wearing it required a strength he no longer possessed. Alongside the pressures of fame came judgment, the kind whispered behind screens, written in comment sections, or expressed through the cold silence of old friends. People who once knew Adrian began to treat him differently. Some pretended not to know him at all, as if his new career negated every memory they shared. Others acted overly curious, asking invasive questions or making jokes he didn't appreciate. His family reacted with confusion and disappointment. Conversations became shorter, visits became tense. Adrian found himself living between two worlds, the world where he was celebrated and desired, and the world where he was dismissed and misunderstood. The contrast was painful. Being famous in one space and rejected in another fractured his sense of self. Dating was nearly impossible. Whenever he met someone new, he hesitated to share what he did, knowing the reaction could shift everything. Some people tried to hide their discomfort, but he could see it in their eyes, in the hesitation before they asked their next question. Others reacted with curiosity that felt more like objectification than genuine interest. And even when he met someone who seemed accepting at first, jealousy and insecurity eventually seeped into the relationship. They worried about his scenes, about his fans, about the attention he received from strangers online. Adrian found himself constantly trying to reassure and explain, but the emotional labor grew exhausting. Slowly, he began to close himself off, telling himself he didn't need romantic relationships, that they were too complicated anyway. But deep down, he longed for connection, real connection, the kind that fame could never provide. The physical demands of his work also began to catch up with him. Long hours on set drained his energy. The pressure to stay in perfect shape left him fluctuating between strict diets and emotional eating. He developed chronic back pain from repetitive physical strain, but kept going, afraid that taking time off would jeopardize his momentum. He learned to ignore his body's signals, pushing through discomfort until it became normal. His career might have looked glamorous from the outside, but behind the scenes, the toll it took on him was undeniable. As his fame grew, so did the scrutiny. People online dissected every aspect of his life, his body, his relationships, his past. Whenever he posted a photo, comments flooded in, some complimentary, others cruel. On bad days, he found himself scrolling endlessly, focusing only on the negative words, letting them burrow into his thoughts. The criticism chipped away at the confidence he once felt. He started comparing himself to other performers, worrying constantly about being replaced. Some days, he felt like his entire worth was tied to how many likes he received or how many scenes he booked. On those days, the fame he once loved felt suffocating, but fame also provided moments of unexpected beauty. Adrian met people from around the world who shared their stories with him. Stories of insecurity, pain, healing. They thanked him for being open about his struggles, for showing a level of vulnerability they didn't expect from someone in his industry. These messages reminded him that behind all the noise, all the drama, all the pressure, there were real human connections being formed. It gave him a sense of purpose he desperately needed. He began to speak more openly about mental health, about the realities of working in adult entertainment, about the loneliness that fame often brings. In doing so, he felt a spark of authenticity returning to his life, a spark he feared he had lost. Still, he couldn't ignore the truth forever. He was burning out. The work, the pressure, the constant performative nature of both his job and his online presence, it all weighed on him. He found himself lying awake at night, wondering how long he could keep this up. Was this really the life he wanted? Or was he simply afraid to walk away from the only thing that had ever made him feel valuable? The thought of starting over terrified him. What other career would take him seriously? Would people see past his past? Would he ever be known for anything else? The breaking point came one evening after a long shoot that had pushed him past his limits. As he drove home, exhausted and emotionally drained, he suddenly felt the overwhelming urge to cry. Not from sadness, necessarily, but from the sheer weight of everything he had been carrying. When he got home, he sat on the edge of his bed and allowed himself to feel everything he had been suppressing for years. The fear, the loneliness, the exhaustion, the longing for a life that felt real. He knew then that something had to change. Over the following months, Adrian gradually reduced his workload. He began seeing a therapist who specialized in helping people in unconventional careers. Through these sessions, he peeled back the layers of his life, confronting the parts of himself he had ignored for too long. He talked about his fears of inadequacy, his struggles with body image, his longing for meaningful relationships, and the internal conflict between who he was and who he felt pressured to be. It was painful, uncomfortable work, but with each session, he felt himself becoming more grounded. He also reconnected with old hobbies, writing, photography, hiking. These activities reminded him of the person he had been before fame, before the industry, before the pressure. Slowly, he built a new sense of self not tied to his stage name or the persona he portrayed. He began exploring new career options, content creation, coaching, even freelance directing. Some projects succeeded, some failed, but each attempt brought him closer to rediscovering his identity. During this transition, fame shifted in his life. It no longer felt like a force controlling him. Instead, it became something he could navigate with clearer boundaries. He learned to post less, to protect his personal life, to engage with fans in healthy, balanced ways. He stopped reading harsh comments. He stopped comparing himself to others. He realized that fame was never meant to be the foundation of his self-worth. It was simply a byproduct of a job he had once taken out of necessity. As he carved a new path, Adrian found peace in unexpected places. He met new friends who accepted him without judgment. He rebuilt a healthier relationship with his family, slowly earning back their trust and understanding. He even allowed himself to date again, cautiously but optimistically. And though not every relationship lasted, he found that honesty and vulnerability brought deeper connections than he had ever experienced during the peak of his fame. Years later, when people recognized him, he felt a strange mixture of nostalgia and gratitude. He no longer felt defined by his past, nor ashamed of it. Instead, he saw it as a chapter, an important one, filled with lessons, pain, triumphs, and growth. He understood now that fame had given him visibility, but had also taken a toll. It had lifted him up and broken him down. It had introduced him to people who adored him and to people who judged him. It had forced him to confront himself in ways he never expected. In the end, Adrian realized something profound. Fame is neither good nor bad on its own. It is a mirror. It reflects back the parts of ourselves we try hardest to hide, the insecurities we ignore, the desires we chase. And for him, the price of fame was learning how to face his own reflection, honestly, painfully, and ultimately with compassion. Today, he tells his story not to warn people away from the adult industry, nor to glamorize it, but to humanize it. To show that behind every face on a screen is a person who feels deeply, struggles quietly, and searches for meaning just like everyone else. He hopes that by sharing his journey, the highs and the lows, others will understand that fame is complicated, and the people who live within it deserve empathy, not assumptions. And perhaps most importantly, he hopes that those who feel lost, pressured, or overwhelmed in their own lives might see a piece of themselves in his story and find the courage to seek something better. Because the real journey, the most important one, is not the pursuit of fame, but the pursuit of self, understanding, healing, and inner peace.